gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores, and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs came and licked his sores. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. In hell, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away, with Lazarus by his side. So he called to him, "Father Abraham, have pity on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire." But Abraham replied, "Son, remember that in your lifetime you received good things, while Lazarus received bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. And besides all this, between us and you, a great chasm has been fixed, so that those who want to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over from there to us." He answered, "And I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers. Let him warn them, so that they will not also come to this place of torment." Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them." "No, Father Abraham," he said, "but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent." He said to them, "If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead."
About 8 weeks ago, I went to Canoe Monastery, and in one of the sessions, I put on my hill walking trousers, which are a very fetching luminous yellow, with slate grey reinforcements on the back and on the knee panels. I had on a brand new pair of boots that I intended to break in at Scarpa Ranger. I had on a green top. And so I went to the morning session dressed like that, because I knew after lunch you were free to go wherever you wanted in the monastery grounds. And if you leave the monastery grounds of St Mary's Canoe in Perth, you're about halfway up the hill, but you still have another little climb to go through the tree line. You come out at the summit, and there's lovely cliffs with views over the Tay as it starts to open up into its estuary, moving further east over to Dundee. The views are quite nice. You look to the west, and you start to see the hills in the west coast develop. So that's what I did. Then I returned back after I'd done that climb at Canoe and sat for my next meal, because you're certainly well fed in the monastery. And one of the nuns, when she saw that I was sitting at the dinner table, showered and changed, she said to me, "Oh, you're someone from the conference." I said, "Yes." "I thought you were the gardener." "Because of my trousers." She said, "The way you were dressed, I thought you were gardening staff." I said, No, I was intending to dress like that because I was heading up to the top of the hill." And she was impressed that I managed to get to the top of the hill as well. I stood out with those trousers, and I wonder if you recognise how that reading stands out in the Bible. Some Bible editions, they might have the rich man and Lazarus. That's how they'll title that section. Some have the parable. Now, what makes it unique? If it is a parable, what would make it different from all the other parables? If it's not a parable, then maybe what makes it unique explains why it's there. In parables, Jesus, when he's sharing truth, keeps it generic. There was a rich man who had 2 sons. The first son said to the father, the elder son said to the father, "You've never given me as much as a goat to celebrate with my friends. This son of you, this son." Or there was a widow who searched. Or there was a king. Or there were 10 virgins. And it's always the case that he speaks about these things in these general terms. But what makes this completely different and standing out is he uses a name. There's a rich man, and then there's Lazarus. I don't think this is a parable. I think this is something Jesus either recalls from his memory, or information that he has, which he possesses information that, humanly speaking, would be impossible for us to possess, but not for him. And so the rich man and Lazarus, how it helps us celebrate communion, not just because it's talking about bread and crumbs, and the prayer books talk about that, us being unworthy to receive the crumbs of the table of the Lord, but how it helps us focus as we take communion is it gives us a word, I believe, about price. And then it gives us a word about purpose, and then a word about peace. So what's the first word then? The one on price. Well, it starts with price. There was a rich man. And if that doesn't tell you he's rich, you then hear in the verses that follow how you know he's rich. He's dressed in purple, the hardest of the colours to make in the ancient world. If you could make purple, you could make money. If you could buy purple, you had money. It was pretty much as simple as that. But the average person then in God's church would have feasted probably once or twice a year at big festivals. Passover, certainly. Day of Atonement. This man feasts every day. So he's not short of a bob or two. In fact, he's way beyond average wealth. He's incredibly wealthy. And then you see the flip side. The opposite is the person who's named, Lazarus. He sits at the gate in rags, the verses tell us, and the dogs come and they lick his sores. Then it changes. It leaves time and it enters eternity, and the roles are reversed. Now Lazarus finds himself in the banquet, and the man finds himself outside. You might think this is an account about finance. It's talking about money, what people are worth. Well, it does open speaking about price and what people are worth. But I think Jesus wants us to reverse it. It's not the bank account which is the focus. It's the heart account which is the focus. Lazarus has been able to do what? Well, what we said to the children. He was able in his life, though dressed in rags, with dogs licking his sores, he was able to listen when people read the promises of God. And what did Lazarus do with the promises of God? He believed them. It's as simple as that. He believed them. Well, what would he believe? That God loved him. Even in light of the rags and the sores, that the Holy Spirit could fill him. Even in light of the rags and the sores, that there would be a day of justice. Even in light of the rags and the sores, here is one who understands it's the heart account God is interested in, not the bank account. How do you know which one that you and me are interested in? We ran the test the other week. We put up Elon Musk, we put up Bill Gates, and what did we ask of the kids? How much are they worth? What does the answer come back? Always in pounds and dollars. And people often say that, when someone dies, what's that person worth? What do they mean? Well, I know because I watched some of this stuff, and I've learned some of it. I've helped Caroline sit exams, and it's about movable estates, and is it unmovable estates? That's basically what you're worth. Your cash and your house and things like that. But that's not the answer. The answer is, what are we worth? The blood of the Son of God. We were singing it. The mystery of the cross. Your blood has washed away my sin. It's your blood. His blood. It's not the bank account, but the heart account. That's where we make the investment. That's where we see the price. So as you take the elements of bread and wine and we celebrate communion, ask yourself, the next time I'm drawn to the question, what is that person worth? Or what am I even worth? Let me answer that question. What am I worth? I'm worth the blood. Now maybe some people try to tell you that you're not worth it, that you are worth less. Spouses can tell people they're worth less. Parents, children, siblings, so-called friends, some bosses at work, you're worthless, and they can be made feel worthless. Just a tax code. You're not worthless. You're priceless. What are we worth? All the same. We're worth his blood. Think on that as you touch the elements of bread and wine. Of course, for the Sadducees, they would be raging. If it is a parable, or it is a story, or it is a recall of memory, they would have been happy if it just ended when both men died. But Jesus carries it off into another realm, leaving time and entering eternity. And what can you say about Lazarus and the rich man? What do they have in common? Quite simple. They were both made for a purpose that's bigger than time. I'm going to keep that real simple. Just stay with that. What are they made for? Well, amongst many other things, and I'm sure they were made for many, many, many things, this one thing they were certainly made for, they were made for somewhere more than simply time. There is a greater purpose to your existence, and it's not just this life. There is another purpose to your existence, and it's a life to come. Now, for Lazarus, it's blessing. And for the rich man, maybe we could call it rich Lazarus and the poor man, for him, it's burden. But it's a purpose all the same. And what is it, a purpose that helps you say when you take bread and wine? A bit like when the question comes, what is that person worth? And you say, well, they're priceless because they're worth the blood of the Son. What's the purpose? What are you going to say? You know, when the person gets older and they look at the world, maybe they watch the news, always dangerous. Watch with caution, take with a pinch of salt. They watch the news, or they see the interest rates, or they see the urban chaos, and they turn round, and what's the great phrase? The pearl of wisdom that comes from people who are allowed to say it because they're older. They say things like, I'm glad I've lived my life. Edward, they say, I'm glad I'm not raising a family in this age. And I think, what an encouragement. What an encouragement. I'm raising a family in Jesus, so, be encouraged. But people speak like that. I'm glad, they say, I've had my life. What's the answer in light of the purpose from the parable? No one can talk like that. Whether it's for blessing or whether it's for the burden of hell, no one can talk like that. There is not a creature in God's creation that can turn round on this earth and say to another human creature on this earth, I've had my life. You think you've had your life? It's not even started. You've had the minuscule that's in time. You've had the birth canal. You've yet to be born into the eternity. Oh, the process of being born has started. When you're born again, it's started, but it's not completed until we're there in this other realm. So when you take the bread and wine, you may be tempted to review your life. Maybe your life is quite long, or maybe some of the band members, I won't say who, your life has been quite short so far. Been quite short. But whether it's long or short in human terms, it's barely started. It's barely started. For a guitarist and a drummer, or a flute player, or someone in the 90s, it's barely started. Look forward as well. When you take the bread and wine, remind yourself of the purpose for which you've been made. You've been made for a concept known as eternity. You ever want to mess with a physicist's mind? Get him talking about things like that. Eternity. That's what we're made for. And finally, there is a peace. Now maybe you think, that's the last thing this account gives me, is a sense of peace. I mean, okay, Lazarus, I get that. That's nice. But the other man, he wants out. He wants out. I mean, how unfair to want out. Yeah, he's changed his mind. I give you that 100%. That man changed his mind. He just didn't change his heart. How do I know he didn't change his heart? Well, I'll give you two evidences in that text that tells me. In that place, boggling to my mind, but in that place is an unchanged man. A man who's as bitter, as greedy, and as twisted as he was in the life he lived in this realm. Here's the first sign. Get Lazarus to dip his finger and do what? Cool my tongue. He was used to Lazarus serving him. He was also used to Lazarus raiding his midgie, as we would say when I was growing up. Lazarus is a bin hawker. As this man would eat his food, it would oil in their foods, spice in their foods, and they would not use expensive materials to clean their hands. So do you know what they did? What was cheaper? They baked bread, broke it up, and they wiped the oil and the spice from between their fingers with chunks of bread and threw it in the bin. That's what Lazarus ate, what he found in the bin. You've seen that maybe in a major city. We talked about it on Wednesday night. The man who finishes someone else's fist supper, which has been left on the top of a bin in a city. And you see what we would call in the old world a tramp. And the tramp would go up and pick up the bag, open it up. Or the cigarette ends, that great skill of, I could collect that end, and if I get 10, I can break them open and make one cigarette. There's Lazarus. That's how the rich man related to Lazarus in life. It's how he related to him in death. Get him to serve me, Abraham. Let him cool with water from his finger on my tongue. And here's the second evidence. I think you're dealing with a man who, by hokey, he's changed his mind, but sadly he's not changed his heart, because he says, I've got brothers. Could you go and let my brothers know about this? I would hate for any of my brothers to be here. There's a phrase again, I have a lot of reminiscing this week growing up, but here's a phrase that we used to use: I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. That's what people said. If they'd encountered something which was truly horrific, and you said, was it really that bad? I mean, was it that bad? They would say, oh, it was worse than bad. I wouldn't have wished it on my worst enemy. Surely this man had more than brothers in that community. He must have had neighbours. Why does he not say, Father Abraham, could you go back and tell my whole village? I would not want any of them to come to a reality like this. But he doesn't care about his neighbours, let alone his enemies. He's only interested in his brothers. So what does that tell you about the eternity, the purpose for which Jesus has saved us? Some get anxious about who's going to be there. Will that person that harmed me be there? Will that person that I love not be there? The Lord wants you to know He doesn't make mistakes. And that's the greatest peace we can have on that whole question of who will I see when I open my eyes at the ultimate communion? Who will be there? And the Bible says, as Jesus says, you leave that to me. There will be no one left out who should be in. And there will never be anyone in who should have been out. And so with His truth, when you take the bread and wine, find peace, that you'll be there. And He'll see to it that it's heaven for you as well.